All right, folks, let's do this. I have things to talk about. This is where I talk about things. I said I was going to talk about things on Twitter and not do it there because it's just a clusterfuck of toxicity. So this is where I do it. This is where I talk about things. And this is where I think things through and hash things out. Obviously, I'm referring to my friend Louis C.K.'s admission that he did some vile, inappropriate, hurtful, damaging, selfish shit. Some sexual misconduct. Some awful behavior. There was a report in the New York Times, obviously you know about that, and then a day later Louis copped to it. And copped to it late. But he did it, and he's my friend, and it's a difficult position to be in. Because I certainly can't condone anything he did. There was no way to justify it, or there's no way to defend it. There's no way to apologize for him about it. There's no way to let him off the hook. But there's a lot of concern about, who knew what, when. How'd you guys let this happen? Everybody knew this. Everybody knew that. Everybody was in on it. It's not true. Sadly, I knew what most people knew. There was a story out there, I guess going back several years, that there were unnamed people in the story. It took place in a hotel room in Aspen. It was always out there, but then it would pick up momentum at different times, and I would ask him about it. I would say that this story about you forcing, these women to watch you jerk off. What is that? Is that true? He goes, no, it's not true. It's not real. It's a rumor. And I would say, well, are you going to address it somehow? To handle it? To get out from under it whenever it shows up? He goes, no, I can't. I can't do that. It'll give it life. It'll give it air. And that was the conversation. The other incidents, how would everybody know about that? One thing that people don't quite take into consideration is when people do shameful shit. They do everything they can to hide it. They, men, women, children hide things for years that they're ashamed of. And if they have to keep doing it, then they keep hiding it from their friends, from their husbands, from their wives. People engage in shameful shit, and they keep it hidden until they get caught. That's what happens. The real problem is that female comics have been hearing about this stuff for a while, and there was no place where they could go with that information. And I know some of them, and I know Rebecca Corey, and she couldn't tell me about this. There was no place for them to go with these stories where they felt safe to tell them, and it's fucking sad. So when it comes to, believing women, I want to believe women, but in this particular instance, there was no one named in that story. There was no place for women to go tell this story. There was no women attached to it. I didn't know their names until Friday. So I believed my friend. It's just that the environment enabled the dismissiveness of it. How do I put this? The work environment, the social environment makes it difficult for people to come forward and be heard, to be listened to be believed, and for action to be taken around that. It is pushed aside. It is dismissed. It is framed as an annoyance or an embarrassment. It is used against people. It is used as a threat. That is the structure that exists in life. So how do we get that power structure in check? The big step is empathy. Something I've had problems with. Empathy. When you have man brain, or when you are not capable of empathizing properly with women, which I don't think a lot of men are, and I'm not going to speak for all men, but I can speak for myself. To find that empathy, requires some sort of vigilance. It requires, really being, not just listening to someone's story or listening to something someone says, to actually put yourself in the place of another person. That requires a little work especially if you're doing it in a work situation, in a situation where there's a power dynamic, in a situation where you're not even seeing a person, you're just seeing a woman who is there to receive your garbage, or to be used as a sexual object, or to be diminished or condescended to or dismissed or pushed aside with your own selfish needs and desires. It's hard to understand that power dynamic is real and it exists, because things have been the way they've been for a long time. Like my friend Sovereign said to me, she said, what it comes down to is that no one should be asked if they want to see your dick when they walk into work. That, just thinking about it like that should open up an entire window of empathy to what a lot of women have to deal with every day walking into toxic male work environments. It's just a bubbling undercurrent. If it's not overt, it's an electrical undercurrent that has always run through society. So that's the way things are set up. And now when you talk about comedy, that world is a goddamn free-for-all. It's a Wild West show. Is it a boys' club? Yeah, I guess it is. And in terms of my own experience with that and looking back on it, when there are women comics, I'm like, I think women are funny and they've got to be able to fight it out. There was no safe space created for women. There was no special treatment given for women. And then it was just sort of like, if you can cut it, if you can make it, if you can rise up out of this garbage that is the comedy scene of what I came up in, then you deserve it. What you didn't take into consideration is all the fucking obstacles that they're up against aside from just that. And my friend Laurie Kilmartin actually wrote a very nice piece in the New York Times about that. That, yeah, that was the way I thought. That's the way guys thought. I know a lot of, most male comics respect female comics. And they say, well, she was able to do it. Well, what we don't really, I think, know is just how much bullshit they have to deal with on top of just figuring out how to get on stage and do comedy. They have to deal with all of us, all of the male bullshit that every woman has to deal with in every work environment. There just is no HR department in comedy. There's no place to go to have grievances. It's stacked against you. If you got a male club owner and you got a dude that they're trying to make into a big comic and, he says something or does something or assaults somebody, it's always brushed under the rug, or, hey man, don't make trouble. Don't embarrass everybody. Don't embarrass yourself. That is the way it is, and that is not correct. And look, I'm guilty of it. I had a show of my own on television for 4 years. I didn't have a woman writer on that staff. I didn't make that happen. I had one woman director. In comedy, I don't know really what goes on in most clubs anymore, but there is an imbalance. And also just the idea of changing my mindset or anyone's mindset about women as business. I mean, I'm on a show right now where I'm almost the only man. And it's pretty amazing. And it's a lesson that I'm learning, for the first time in my life. I'm 54 fucking years old. And I'm surrounded by women in a work environment. And it's not a problem for me to behave. And it's not a problem for me to respect and appreciate and have boundaries and be in awe of the people I'm working with. I don't know that it ever was necessarily a problem with me, but I certainly have been a toxic male presence. I've been a very toxic male presence in my life. I think I operate now at maybe a 30 to 25 to 30% toxicity level, but I've certainly been up around 90 in terms of being emotionally abusive, insensitive, angry, selfish, compulsive, and completely without empathy to the power structure that exists between men and women. I mean, God knows I was in 2 relationships with women who started out as fans. I married one and I was engaged to another one. And I didn't fully understand that dynamic. To me, it just felt like, well, this works out because they like me and they get me. So my appreciation or respect or understanding of women was relatively limited to my expectations for a very long time. And it's better. It's better because I'm older. I've taken some hits. I've thought about things. So here we are, and I have a close friend who has acted inappropriately, and there are consequences to it, and people are hurt because of it. What do I think about now? About this specific thing, about this power dynamic that just sort of goes unspoken or unappreciated. And I'm not speaking generally. I guess I'm speaking for me. That, because I'm a self-involved person or I'm a selfish person, do I not recognize it in my own life? I don't in a lot of ways. And it was odd because, when you start to drift as a man into that zone of like, I don't see what the big deal is. Just jerked off in front of them or jerked off on a phone. They could have left. They could have done this. They could have done that. He asked, it's not illegal. Yeah, but it's gross. It's creepy. It's massively inappropriate. It's potentially traumatizing. And I had to and I haven't talked about this, in order for me to access my empathy, it has evolved over time. And if you listen to the podcast, you can hear it happening. I think we all have the capacity to do it, but I was sort of empathy deficient, in a lot of ways, not just to women, just to people in general, because I was so consumed with my own, self-hatred and my own bitterness and my own anger that I just couldn't see past anything. And that sort of slowly started to erode, my lack of empathy, and I re-engaged over time from doing the job that I do, which is listening to people. But this particular thing of the power dynamic and feeling frozen and incapable to speak or act in a moment that is, profanely inappropriate or something that you do not want. That's one of those things where, a dude will say, will you just leave? Why don't you just leave? What is it about that moment of paralysis? And I thought about a situation I don't really think I've talked about publicly. And obviously this isn't about me, and I'm not comparing myself to women in any way. I'm trying to access the empathy and the understanding of this implicit and malignant age-old power dynamic so I can grow and help change things. Yeah, this is obviously a fucking massive, turbulent learning moment for men if you choose to take the education. But going back years ago when I was in college, I had a professor, a philosophy professor. I guess I was 18 or 19 years old. And, and I really wanted to be smart. I really wanted to be an intellectual person. I really wanted to, to be thought of that way. And I wanted to have the goods to do that. And I took this class, and it was way over my head. I couldn't wrap my brain around it, but I liked the teacher a lot. This guy was a big, tall dude, big curly mustache, very powerful figure, very witty, intelligent, understood things, good dresser. He's just a powerful, impactful guy. Had a lot of impact on me. I liked that guy. And I wanted him to acknowledge me as someone, who's smart, who's, on the right path, who's gonna do it. Who's gonna give me some encouragement. Be my dad. Help me out. Guide me somehow. I remember, he wanted to have, lunch, and we had lunch one time, and it was great. We were talking about stuff. He was explaining things to me. He was making things understandable. And I appreciated the time, and I was a little lost. And then we, went out to dinner one time, and it was a little different. He got a little loopy, got a little drunky, and the conversation was different. His vibe was different. And, and I was uncomfortable. So, after that dinner, when, I was going to walk home, and, he pulled me aside and grabbed me and kissed me on my mouth, did I go, fuck you, what the fuck, god damn it, I don't want this, what the fuck are you doing? No, I didn't do that. I took it. And my body went into a paralysis. It was almost like a leaving the body kind of moment. And I could not do anything. And once it stopped and I got out, and I politely said, that I'm not into that. And, okay, I got to go. I felt bad. And, and I carried that confusion and that shame with me for a while. And I put it aside, because I got through it, and it was just something that happened, and it wasn't, whatever, it was fucked up, but, you're all right. But looking back on that, and I am all right, men kissing men's not horrible. It was just not something I was into or am into. And it was, I was young and impressionable, and a guy I respected and looked up to, who I was in class with, did that. And I had to go back to that class, and it was awful. The feeling of going back to the class was awful. The feeling of vulnerability of not having control over that. And then it was awful. So I somehow, in light of this, of trying to understand what it feels like to not be able to leave, or to, be, in a position where, somebody you respected or wanted, respect from, who you even idolized, takes advantage or does something sexually inappropriate. It's scarring. There's no doubt about that. And even if it's mundane, like what I went through was mundane, and it's not something women go through all the time. There was no cocks involved, but it was a disrespect of personal boundaries, and I could feel him misreading it. Like he was getting over on me. So from me to get to that place, and I think a lot of people have been in that place, who have been on the victim side of a power structure, even if it's not sexual, the humiliation of that. You can probably tap into it. So, when I got to that place, and I read the New York Times piece, and then I read Louis' statement about it, and, I thought about the women. I know Rebecca. To move from the toxic male or just male disposition of like, what's the big deal? He didn't fuck him. He asked. He just jerked off. It's just kind of pathetic. It's like, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that it's boundary shattering. It is traumatizing. It is unexpected. It is shaming. And if you let yourself feel that, if you just let yourself feel what all those women went through, even if it didn't seem violent to you or like rape or any of that shit, just the fact that, these are people that worked with Louis. These are the women that you work with. Like, think about it. Think about wherever you work. When you make a comment, even a minor one. Look, everybody has office crushes and stuff. But as soon as you make it out of your mouth, and that becomes uncomfortable forever. Like, these things, they may not destroy your life. They may not even register in the big picture, but they're stuck there. They're stuck there as a trauma, as a moment where things change forever, and there's a discomfort there. There's a shame there. There's an injury there. There's a violation there that you can't give voice to. Well, now these voices are out, and you got to listen to these voices. And you got to understand that. It's respect. And the way forward for us, in all workplaces, in life, is to make sure that these voices are heard, and then they feel that they can be heard. And look, like, everybody has made mistakes. Everybody has minor or major transgressions in their life. And I believe that everybody is capable of change. And I have to believe that. If you can't change, if you don't feel like you're changing quick enough, you can behave. You can know enough to behave. And then maybe you'll change. Most people who have a heart and a mind, know when they're doing shameful shit. Get help, because the more secrets you keep, the more malignant it becomes. And look, I hope this hasn't come off as any sort of apology for anything. I'm disappointed in my friend. He did some gross shit, some damaging shit. And people are like, well, how are you going to be friends with that guy? He's my friend. And, it's like, now he fucked up. And, he's in big fucking trouble. So, well, what am I going to do? I'm just, I'm going to be his friend. What do you want me to do? I mean, it's probably the best time to be his friend when he needs to make changes in his life. And, I can learn from it. He can learn from it, I hope. But, look, I know obviously that what I have to say here in more than how many characters are on Twitter now, isn't going to, please everybody. People are going to be mad about something. I understand. But I mean, my only hope is that, it helps somebody look at themselves somehow differently and look at the situation in a way that's proactive. It's about, it's about the struggle to be better people and make the places we live in and the places we work in function better for everybody. Okay, so I needed to say those things. I needed to say them here. I think it was the place to do it. And now we're going to do the show. I have a show.